All right, thank you everyone for being here. My name is Charmaine Mendez, the Adult Services Librarian from the Moreno Valley Public Library. This virtual author showcase journaling workshop is sponsored by the Moreno Valley Friends of the Library. If you have any questions for Anna, feel free to type them in the Q&A box or raise your hand and she will get to them. So a few announcements before Anna begins. Our 2020 Summer Discovery Program for all ages is still going on. It's not too late to join in, read and participate in activities and our virtual programs to earn online badges and online raffle tickets for a chance to win a grand prize at the end of the summer. For those of you who are registered for our Summer Discovery Program, here's a secret code to earn an online badge for attending this program. So let me go ahead and put it in the chat box for all of you to see. Let me open up the chat. Here we go. So that's the website for our summer reading. That is the secret code, self-love, all in capital letters, one word. If you input that into our summer discovery website, you'll earn a special online badge for participating in this program. If you're not registered, you can still sign up and input the secret code later. Now I'll introduce our special guest. Today we have Anna Christian, who is an author, writer consultant, educator, independent historian, and a member of the Riverside Renaissance Writers. She has written fiction, poems, book reviews and essays, short stories, 2 one-act plays, and a children's play, The Big Table, which was produced at Francis Williams Corner Theater and is now a picture book. She is also the author of Meet It, Greet It, and Defeat It, a biography of Francis C. Williams, adult contemporary novels, Daniel's Wife, Then Sings My Soul, and the Bobby and Sunny mystery series for preteens. She's also the CEO of Daddy LT Productions, which provides editing, proofreading, book reviews, and conducts writing workshops. Thank you for being here, Anna.
Thank you. I really appreciate it. The opportunity to share. I think I had a problem because I have notes, but the notes somehow did not come out, all right? So I'm just going to be winging it. And let me just start off by talking about what journaling is and how journaling is really an important tool for writers. Now, going back through history, journaling used to be a norm. And it was how we got to know a lot of the details, you know, the special details of life back in certain days. And, you know, as we go through the slides, we'll see how some of the many of the famous people that we know kept journals. For me, much of what we know about the past comes from famous people. I began writing a journal when I read Anais Nin's diaries years ago. I was up in Oregon and I checked it out of the library and I became fascinated with her account of her friendships with Henry and June Miller and other artists in the early part of the 20th century in Paris. And before long, I was hooked by that style of writing. So I started keeping a diary. And on rare occasions when I could remember, I'd record my daily activities. Then I lock it, and anyone who really wanted to read what I'd written could easily open it with a paper clip. However, after reading Anais Nin's diaries, I soon found that that small white book that I'd purchased was too confining. I needed to write down more than my daily mundane activities. So I purchased a large notebook and thus began my years of journaling. I now have volumes, a travel journal, one when my son was a baby, a gardening journal in which I keep track of my plants and how well they're doing, and my main journal of which I include some of my activities. I don't write in it every day, but anything significant. I try to put in as much detail as possible. I might write a poem in my journal. I might write about heartbreak and breakthroughs. I ran, I rave, I laugh, I cry. In other words, journal writing is cathartic. I mean, you can relieve a lot of your attention, a lot of your anger and so forth through just writing, keeping a journal. When I go back and read my entries from years ago, I can relive the experiences, though they're not always pleasant, but sometimes I get mad and sometimes I feel heartbreak all over again. But sometimes rereading my journal leads me to understand why things went the way they did. And I remember people and incidents I'd long forgotten. Let me start showing the slide presentation, and let's go on to the first presentation. And many times people have asked me, what's the difference between a diary and a journal? And I'd say technically a diary, you might write your everyday things that's happening in your life, just record it. It's an orderly record. It's not as freeing, I think, as a journal is. Your journal, you can put your activities in it, the things that you do, but it's also, you might put your emotions, you might put a self-examination, a reflect, it can be reflected, a time to reflect on the past. It's, or things that happen to you. It's, and you can be free to doodle in it, write in it, draw in it, do whatever, illustrate it, whatever you want to do. You can do that with your journal. The different types of journal writing, as I mentioned before, there's the personal journal. And as I said, I started off writing my personal journal, my personal thoughts, my description of people, my places and things and ideas. I've written all of those things in my journal. And I said, I have volumes. I started off with a loose leaf paper, just writing on paper. And then I eventually gradually moved to notebooks. And now I use my computer when I write in my journal. There's also the travel journal. So whenever I go any place, I always carry a notebook with me. And that's my travel journal. I'll describe the journal. I'll describe the journey. I'll put in how I felt about it and anything that I've learned. If I've learned new words and so forth, I'll put those in there. A description of maybe the tour guides, a description of the places and so forth. And that's really good, to have. I don't keep a dream journal, but some people that I know do keep dream journals, but you'd have to keep that right by your bed because dreams fade pretty fast. So I don't really keep a dream journal, but I've heard of people who did, and I think it's either one of the famous directors that many of his films are based on his dream journals. Children or your child's journal. When my son was very young, I would note down his, what his activities, any words that he learned, any things that he did. And I would keep that separate from my personal journal because that would be strictly for him, that I thought maybe I would give to him when he grew up. So, as he became an adult, but I think I may have shared a couple of things with him, but I don't write that anymore because he's an adult. Okay, let's see. Now the next thing, some of the advantages of keeping a journal is that it can increase your powers of observation. When you start writing a journal, you may not pay much attention to observing, being observant of various things. But as you go on and you realize that it's good practice, you learn, you're observing. Nobody's going to read it. You're writing down what your observations are. What does a person look like? What does a place look like, and so forth. It also helps to eliminate writer's block, because so many times people say, I don't know what to write about. But if you have your journal and you've been keeping a journal, you can always go back and you'll see different things, different clues that you can use to maybe lift you over that writer's block or kind of break it down. It also helps you to develop a writing habit. And if you write in your journal enough, your writing becomes becomes freer, and you can get used to writing. Some people that don't like to write, if they keep a journal and they develop a habit of writing, it'll help you with, as a writer. And also it preserves memories. I can always look back and see how I was feeling a certain day, what happened, what particular event happened at a certain time. So that's a pretty good advantage of keeping a journal. Now, some of the disadvantages, as I mentioned in the beginning, is that it can trigger you an emotional response. Sometimes I've gone back to my journal and you might want to tear the pages up, or you might want to laugh, or, so it triggers emotional responses, and they can be good or bad. but that's maybe some of the one of the disadvantages of keeping a journal. And it also can get in the way of a creative project, because I've found that my need to write in my journal, I've had to put a creative project aside because of, because I want to write something in my journal, or I put my journal aside while I work on the creative project. And sometimes time will go by. And then when I get back to my journal, I've maybe lost that particular moment and that thing, that feeling and so forth that happened. So that might be a disadvantage. You might think of some other disadvantages or advantages or disadvantages of keeping a journal. Now, what can you get from your journal? Now, I started writing a journal back in, oh my God, I know I was writing it in the 80s. And anything that happened, I can go back to that. I can, all my journals, and I can see such and such a thing happening, and then I can say, hey, I can get a fresh story idea. Somebody told me something and I wrote it down on my journal, and I'm going through my journal and I say, hey, that's an idea for a story. So you can get that. You can also find certain themes. If you look in your journal, you'll find themes that run through our lives, like love, disagreements. You might find themes, jealousy. That might be a theme that you might come across in your journal. There are all kinds of themes that you might, a tragic event that happened might be a theme that you might glean from your journal. Another thing is that if you kept your journal and you paid attention to people, and we meet people all the time, you could write down a character description that you might want to use in your writing a short story or writing a novel or whatever. You might see certain things in people that you have met and that you've written and noted in your journal that you can use in a story. And because you've taken it from real life, it gives authenticity to your description of the people maybe you've put together. So it's good for character description too. And also setting. If you've traveled anywhere, or even in your everyday life, the setting, you can look in your journal and you can get specifics. For example, any place that you've gone to, you can use that setting, or you get it out of your journal, taking it out of your journal, and you use that setting and create your stories, or even your nonfiction. Some of the people who have, famous people that we know that have written journals, I'd say Anne Frank, she's the most one that, that I think even high school, junior high school, you had to read. We all had to read Anne Frank, the Diary of Anne Frank. How did we know what was going on in Holland and Amsterdam during World War II? But we learn about it from the point of view of this young girl hiding in an attic. And we learn about her relationships. We learn about what was going on, around her and so forth, her family and so forth. So that's a very famous historical journal that you can see how that journal could be turned into to a story, or people can take it and make it into something. I think about Maya Angelou. I think a lot of her books, several of her books, are biographical. They're journals of they're things that she had gone through, and though she's writing it as a fiction, it's actually nonfiction. So, and I'm sure that she kept and I'm sure she probably did keep a journal, but you can get more details from your journal that you can put into your into whatever you're writing. I've never read any of Albert Einstein's journals, but I'm sure that he wrote. But I think when I was looking up what historical figures kept journals, and I see Albert Einstein, Mary Curie, Mark Twain, or Samuel Clemens, who wrote The Adventures of Huckleberry Finn, Frida Kahlo, who was she was very close to Picasso, and she wrote a journal. Charles Darwin, the explorer, he wrote a journal. And as I mentioned, Anais Nin, that she has volumes. So if you go to the library and you start reading her journals, I mean, it's fascinating about Paris in the 1920s and the relationships between the different people that she knew. And it was her style of writing, as I mentioned before, that got me into wanting to write a journal. I had some activities, a writing activity. If you've never written a journal before, you might just come up with just anything. And so I just said, well, you can start from the time you woke up and you can just start writing down what happened. And the more you write, the more detail you put in. What did you eat for breakfast? Okay, you don't write, I mean, you can write, I wrote Cheerios, but then what do those Cheerios look like, you know? Lunch, what did I have for lunch? A ham sandwich? What did the bread look like? Where'd you get the bread? You can develop an entire paragraphs and so forth, just based on your journal and what you know, how did you feel when you got out of bed in the morning, and anything important that happened, and any place that you went for the first time, and maybe what you're looking forward to. All of those are just, those suggestions are just to get you started, and getting in the habit of maybe writing down thoughts. And I find that writing a journal is really freeing, because I don't have to worry about spelling. I don't have to worry about punctuation. I don't have to worry about anybody looking at it, because it's mine. And so I'll keep it away. I'll put it away, and I'll only bring it out, you know, when I want to write something down. Now that's my, you know, if you have any questions, this is just my contact information, and my websites are annachristian.com, and one website, Francis Place, that I've been that I have, that I find that really fascinating, because I've got like about 9,000 subscribers to Francis Place. So you want to go in, you know, I'm pretty proud of that site. Just a list of the books that I've written, Then Sings My Song, Daniel's Wife, and so forth, that Charmaine read in the beginning, you know, the introduction. So if there's any questions, I'm open to questions. Charmaine, you have any questions, or anybody else that have questions?
I do have one question.
Yeah.
Do you have a recommendation of how often to write in a journal and how long? Because some people recommend, oh, you need to write 30 minutes a day. Some say, oh, an hour. Some say just write whenever you feel like it. So do you have like a daily habit of journaling, and how long you recommend people should journal?
Not really. I just, because I think if you get into a schedule, I mean, you could get into a schedule, but somehow, you know, sometimes it's confining. Sometimes you might, nothing in particular, nothing of significance might have happened that particular day. And so you might not want to write something, you know, so I would hesitate to put, you know, to put any kind of constrictions on your writing. I know if you're working on a story or something like that, or you just, you know, I think in that instance, you may want to set up a schedule of writing. But in terms of my journal, I'm free to write in it whenever anything significant happens. And I'll write I might write a paragraph. I might write a page. I might get into it and write several pages. So you know, I wouldn't make it confining, you know, specific that way. Any other questions or comments?
Feel free to unmute your microphone, or you can type something in the chat if you prefer to do that.
Okay, yeah, this is James. I have a question. So, what we're talking about, a diary versus a journal. So, are you saying that a diary is something that we expect for people to see, but a journal that we're not? Because
No.
when I see people writing a diary, it's like, you know, dear diary, and they're putting some of their deepest thoughts in it. You know, but you're saying I thought you said that was kind of reserved for the journal. So I'm not real clear on both of those.
Oh, thanks for the question. But, you know, I think they're interchangeable, actually. I think usually when I think about a diary, I think of something short. I mean, they're both, you don't want the public to see it. Both of them might have your intimate, you know, thoughts and everything, but you don't really want the public to see either one. But I look at a journal as being really letting yourself write as long as you want to. You know, a diary might be like chronological order, whereas a journal, I don't think that's it. You know, it's not necessarily in chronological order. But a journal, a diary, you might want to write in every day what happened, but it can get kind of tedious after a while. Whereas a journal, to me, as I said, you could sing in your journal, you can rant and rave in your journal, you can do whatever, write a poem in your journal, and so forth. Whereas a diary, maybe you're writing about your everyday activities. So that would be my yeah.
Okay, thank you. Well, one more question, because like one of the things that that tends to prevent me from journaling is because, like I said, when I'm writing and I misspell a word, I want to edit, you know. And so you're saying it's not that big a deal, that you just keep writing, and so it'll make you be freer, because I'm used to going back, writing something, and then, you know, that's a raw word, so it stops my flow if I'm going back and rewriting and making sure it's grammatically correct and all that kind of stuff. So you said that's not really important in a journaling?
No, right, exactly. And I think that's what makes writing a journal freer, is because you don't have to worry about spelling. You don't edit your journal. I don't, you know, I wouldn't go back and try to edit and say, hey, wait a minute, I spelled this wrong or anything like that. It's like in that moment I've written and I put it away and put it aside, and I don't look at it again until maybe if I feel like going back. I've got, like I said, I seldom go back to my journals, you know, because I've got so many of them. But but you definitely don't worry about editing, because you don't worry about anybody seeing it. But if you pull things out and use them for your, you know, for maybe a story that you're writing, then you might go to it. Then that's where you would do your, you know, whatever creative writing and editing and whatever it is that you want to do to it, but not in your journal. Your journal is that's free. You just do whatever you want to in your journal.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Okay, Anna, this is Deborah. I have a question. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear
Okay,
you.
great. Okay, I have a notebook that I carry with me all the time, and I scrabble, I do illustrations, I put down thoughts, notes, diary dates, but it's not really a journal in terms of recording my activities. So is it a notebook or is it a journal?
I think it is. I think it's a journal. I think it is whatever you want to call it. You know, you could call it your notebook if you keep it. I mean, is it, you have dates? Because I always put a date on mine.
Yes,
I have dates
absolutely.
and as I said, you can call it a journal if you want to. You can call it just notes, but I see it as a journal. You know, I see it as, and it's your personal journal that you keep, and you don't share it with anybody. You don't worry about editing or anything like that, right? Yeah, I would see that as a journal.
It's sounding more like a journal. I call it my notebook, but it's sounding more like a journal.
Yeah,
So
right.
thank you.
Yeah,
Thank you.
Sure. Anyone else? I was going to read a little bit from my journal of Francis Williams, you know, but I had some other things, but I don't want to take up your time. I just had maybe a paragraph just to give you an idea as to how a journal can be written. Okay. Let's see. Okay, just a little bit. This is talking about my friend Francis, and I said it's not going to be not very long. I'm becoming increasingly aware of the magnitude that I've committed myself to. As Frances relates more of her life story, I begin to feel overwhelmed, a novice, unpublished, undisciplined, undertaking to write the life of a giant. As I project ahead, I see myself reaching a point where I'll have to give up my job or temporarily resign to complete this project. Yesterday, I arrived at 4 and we began working. Frances related some of her early life, a brilliant memory, her names of people long dead and places that have been assaulted by time and progress. She's prioritizing the project, moving it from something I should do to something I must do. And I sit for 2 or 3 hours fascinated by her anecdotes, enthusiastically responding, urging her to go on. This woman has lived several lifetimes to my one. Anyway, what I'm going to do is I wrote that in my journal, but then I've also written her biography. And so I've taken, so I'll go back to my journal and I'll pull out the stuff that I've written, you know, about her, and it'll help me to flesh her out in the biography that I'm rewriting. And I'm going to include some of the journal entries that I made, that I did, you know, when I was working with her. So as I said, you can use whatever you've done to put it in whatever you're doing. You can put it in a story. You can make it fictionalize things and so forth. That you've got character, you've got themes, you might have settings and so forth. Any other questions? I see Ollie has joined us, but she doesn't say anything, so that's okay.
Well, that was good.
Okay. I thank you so much. I really appreciate Charmaine. I appreciate all of you guys for coming. And Lawrence, are you still there? Lawrence is an author, and he has, and he's, you know, he's joined us. At least he was here earlier. Thank you.
I do have another question.
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, this is Deborah again. You had said that sometimes there are disadvantages of having a journal, and that would be
Right.
because it triggers an emotional response. So
Yeah.
I have lots of journals, and I've kind of gone through them, and every once in a while it does just that, and I'll kind of just toss it or tear up the
Yeah.
pages and I'm done with it. So how do
Yeah.
you approach that situation? How do you kind of stave off that emotional response where you're not like, okay,
Well,
you know?
yeah. Well, you don't toss it. You don't throw it away because it's how you felt at a particular time, you know.
Right.
And maybe you're writing a story, and you can use what you've gotten from your journal, you know, from that emotional response, and put it into one of your characters.
That's
How
true.
would your
That's true.
character feel? So you can use it. So you don't throw anything away. You keep it, and you can use it at another time. But yeah, I've had instances in my journal where I've said, why am I reading this thing? But then we learn also, when you look back at your journal, all
That's
the things
true.
that you've written, you'll
That's
find that
true.
you have evolved and you have learned something from something.
Mm-hmm.
So that's why, you know, I think it's a good thing. And plus it keeps you writing, and
Yeah.
you use,
And I had one of those diaries in my teenage years with the little lock on it.
yeah. Yeah. Well, like mine, I don't think I got more than a few pages into it. This was getting pretty boring. I said, nah.
Yeah.
But then
Well,
once I
because
started reading, yeah, go ahead.
I just think back then it was more of a diary, and it was more of a,
Yeah.
okay, I got to write every day. And you
Yeah.
get older and go in different directions. So,
Right. Right.
mhm.
Exactly. And so, like, it's not something that you have to do every day, but anything significant, you might want to write, write it down when it is, and capture that moment. And because it
Correct.
does, it does improve your powers of observation. And
Hmm. Hmm. It
and
does.
yeah, and you learn words and so forth. I think it's great I could use all the big words whether I know what they mean or not. In my,
Hmm.
I could I could
Hmm.
try writing in a different voice completely. Just
Okay.
yeah.
Okay.
Okay,
Thank you.
any more questions? Just
So,
Uh,
and we've
yeah, I
got
was gonna say. Oh, I
go
was gonna
ahead.
say. Deborah's her journaling. I mean, it's phenomenal. I mean, when you hear her speak, it's phenomenal. But I do. I'm just trying to piggyback on the fear, because yeah, there are times if I wrote like a year ago, I do have a hard time going back and wanting to read it, because when I do, I kind of cringe sometimes, like, oh, I can't believe I wrote that, or
Hmm.
I mean, it does
Hmm.
show growth, but also, sometimes it's hard for me to go back and look at that and see where I was at then, where I thought I was good and I really wasn't. So I understand what Deborah's saying. So it is a good tool to go back to, but for me, I have to be disciplined to do that, because
Right.
I usually
Right.
want to write it and then move on and just
Right.
move on. But yeah,
yeah,
you
Hmm.
probably
yeah.
need to go back.
Hmm.
Well, as I said, you don't really have to go back. It's only if you're going to use it for some reason. But I go back to read it just to see, where I was 10 years ago or something like that. And
Right.
I won't
Right.
spend that much time, because sometimes I can get caught up in reading my journal and not get much done, other than reading my journal. I'm fascinated. I can't believe it. And I think I told a story once where I lost my journal. I was down at the San Diego Zoo, and I had and someone broke into my car and they took my journal,
Mm.
and
Mm.
and of all things, and then I got a telephone call from someone down at the one of the places down there. Someone found it, and along with my tax things. And when I went to pick it up, the man was involved reading my journal. He's sitting there reading my journal as I walk in, and I'm saying, "What is this guy reading my journal?" That was fascinating. But sometimes, but it's really, it's good practice. So I would encourage everybody to write a journal if they can, and especially if they want to continue with their writing.
So this is Deborah again. If you were to offer the best recommendations on the types of journals that we can keep in terms of writing life memoirs,
Yeah.
what would you say? I mean, certainly children should be part of it, and
Yeah,
perhaps
definitely.
gardening and travel. But
Yeah.
are there specific types if a person is interested in writing their memoirs?
Well, like I do intend to, all of it is good. I do intend to write, because I've done a lot of traveling and I have written a lot of journals on my travels. I will use what I've written. I will pull all those books out and use those in putting together a book on travel. I think your personal memoir, your personal journal, you can use that especially to write your your memoir, because you'll have things in there that are more specific, and they will, they're more specific, and because you captured them at a particular time, and so
Right.
you'll have a fresh approach to whatever you're writing.
Okay, thank you.
Anna, we have a comment from Lawrence. Lawrence
Yes.
seems to be having issues with the microphone, but says, I'm here and listening to this very interesting presentation. I've never considered journaling in the past, but I will certainly do so now. I can see how it could be a useful tool for writing.
Yeah, I thank you. Is Lawrence still on? Anyway, I thank you very much for that comment, because it can be a really valuable tool for writers, because sometimes when you're not working on a project, you're not working on your fiction or your nonfiction, the journal can give you relief, because you don't have to worry about spelling, you don't have to worry about anybody seeing it or anything. So it's a good outlet that if you're feeling overwhelmed by your novel or by whatever you're working on, it's a really good relief.
Any other questions or comments for Anna? All right, thank you so much for being here, everyone. Thank you for your
Yeah,
time,
great
Anna.
job. Great job, Anna. Great job.
Thank you.
And thank you so much. I thank you all for coming, and indulging